Something really big is happening next door to Disneyland in California.
Heads up, everybody. We have a new neighbor.
Oh no, the world ends at the gate.
Disneyland's flat.
Not from this coordinate, Miss White. Aha! They're from California. Ooh, nice limo.
Is there a prince inside?
Sorry, girls, but any interest in a very large bear?
Introducing Disney's California Adventure, a whole new theme park filled with the fun and adventures of California. Right next door to Disneyland, where the magic began.
Let's go see them.
Easy, big guy. Nobody likes a nosy neighbor.
Disney's California Adventure, opening February 2001.
Okay, let's review. That is seatbelt, carry-on item, safety strap, fear of heights, keep your hands and arms inside at all times. Anything else? Yeah. Have a nice flight.
Welcome to the first of a series of collaborations between Walt Disney Imagineering and D23, the official Disney fan club. I'm Leslie Iwerks, and I'm the director of the Imagineering story on Disney+. Over the next several months, I'll be your host as we celebrate a number of Disney park anniversaries and milestones. First up is Disney California Adventure. Disney California Adventure had its 20th anniversary on February 8th, 2021. Though it wasn't quite the celebration we all had hoped for. Due to COVID-19 protocols in California, we all know the park is currently closed, except for a few parks that are partially open for dining and shopping. So we're going to commemorate the park's anniversary in our own way, with a look back at the last 20 years with the Imagineers who all made it happen. I'd like to welcome D23 Gold members today to this exclusive presentation. And I'd also like to welcome the president of Walt Disney Imagineering, Bob Weiss. Hi, Bob.
Hi. First, let me say hello, D23. To all of you, thank you for joining. And Leslie, it's always great to sit down with you and have some time to talk about our business and our future and our past. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. So Bob, why don't we start with a simple question? How did this all start?
Okay.
How's that for a simple question?
Well, how did it all start? As the first thing we all know is that Disneyland was designed by Walt himself and his closest confidants. And as a result, it is the golden goose. It is the thing that I know that all the D23 members and all the fans hold the dearest to their heart is Disneyland. And over the years, actually the environment around Disneyland was declining pretty fast. The streetscapes, the quality of the environment around it, crime, there was a lot going on in Anaheim at that time. And I know that Disney looked at that and said, if we don't really substantively work with Anaheim to raise the total resort, it's possible that this area could decline. And there's nothing that would be worse for Disneyland than to be in an area that had a lot of decline around it. So a lot of work went into the idea that the entire Disney resort should be developed further to encourage Anaheim to want to be a part of it, to want to be able to make street improvements and make improvements to the area. And so there was an idea that there should be a park, a second park. There should be a resort, an expansion of the resort as it existed then. And we should build a downtown Disney somewhat modeled on what we had in Florida, which is a great shopping district, but with a real Disney quality and a real Disney touch. That's really where it all started. And all those things in place today, I think you can drive around the resort and you would say, wow, that was a big change from the way it looked back before any of this was created.
Now, what can you say about Westcott, the infamous Westcott era?
Westcott was a great dream. It was a fantastic dream. I have so many close colleagues who worked on it. I didn't work on it myself, but the idea of bringing the great cultural statement of Epcot in a new way to California was a great dream. And I think everybody loved Westcott. And we all have those projects that we wish we could have done, the ones that we really loved. And that was certainly a visionary project. And we were all excited about it. We're all disappointed that it didn't go forward.
And the idea for this sort of originated in Aspen, Colorado, right?
For Westcott or for Disney California?
Disney California Adventure.
Yeah. And I know there was a charrette about the Anaheim Resort in Aspen. And I do know, because I remember him saying it many times in Florida, in California, that Michael Eisner had this very strong opinion that whatever another park was, it had to be deeply differentiated. And I think part of that came from his knowledge of what happened when Epcot opened. But Epcot really fundamentally changed the terms of the business in Florida completely. And he always felt it was because Epcot wasn't just another Magic Kingdom, it was a completely different idea. And so you had to stay to see both. You had to, the world had to know there was more to see at Disney World. So I know he always took a very strong position that whatever we built next to Disneyland had to be completely differentiated from it. And so I think when in that Aspen charrette, where there was a lot of discussion about, should we do a park that celebrates California? Should we do something that looks at California through a Disney fun lens? Should we, do a park that has a different view of how enclosed it is? Could it be more open? Maybe it doesn't have a big berm all the way around it. Can it celebrate the diversity of people? California is one of the most diverse states in the union. Could it celebrate people from all backgrounds? There were a lot of things that were quite different about it. And also the idea of creating some things that weren't necessarily fantasy. It wasn't really Fantasyland at all. It was celebrating the essence of things like the Pacific Wharf or the boardwalk or the farm of California. It was really an idea about that, and clearly differentiated from Disneyland's original mission, which was really stories as Walt saw them, stories as he grew up, and intended really to differentiate itself.
Well, we all know that, Walt said at Disneyland, it all started with a mouse. And in the case of Disney California Adventure, perhaps you could say that it all started with a parking structure. That's what freed up the parking lot for all that came after it. But it was obviously always more than just a park, right?
Well, that parking, interesting, because I grew up in California, go into that parking lot and usually parking in the back with our family. But yes, without figuring out how to reutilize that parking lot land, this never would have been able to happen. And once you open that up, you have all this amazing land directly adjacent to Disneyland. But interestingly, there's probably no harder task than to build right next to Disneyland, anywhere in the world, right here in Anaheim. Walt's original signature, so beloved by so many fans and people who have been there through the generations. So I think that team had a very tough job just from the very beginning. And this idea of differentiating it, maybe not even having characters in the traditional way that we had them in Disneyland. I think there was a lot of concern that it should be different, and also that it shouldn't run over into territory that was kind of owned by Disneyland also. So I think that explains a lot of things. I always like to say that all Imagineers endeavor to do great projects. We all endeavor to do the greatest projects we possibly can. And we live in different times. We live in times where the criteria is different, the intent is different. So when we look back, we know there was a great group of Imagineers that conceptualized this, and we've updated it substantially since then, added so many new things. But I'm sure that back then they were really trying to, I think this big struggle of what do you build next to Disneyland and how do you do that was a huge discussion.
Right. I mean, of course, the resort master plan being a big part of that. Grand California Resort, Downtown Disney.
And the idea that you could have an integration that you could easily walk from the Disneyland Hotel without crossing a street. By lowering the street, they were able to really make Downtown Disney reach all the way to the Disneyland Hotel. You could walk seamlessly into Downtown Disney. That you could have a very nice landscaped tram route, took you from the parking structure right up to the main entrance. And those things have all been very successful. Downtown Disney itself is thought of. You think, well, there's lots of places to shop in Southern California, but people have the strong connection to Downtown Disney that they have to Disney. So they go there not for normal shopping, but for special shopping, to have a part of their Disney experience. And so that's all been a part of it. The landscaping all around the streets, all around the resort, the new access, the 5 freeway expansion. If you really think about it, the advancements of everything about our property in Anaheim relative to where it was prior to this are really incredible, unprecedented for a city.
Right. No easy feat, for sure.
Right.
As we discovered in the Imagineering story, what you had to go through. But you also celebrate the uniqueness of the Golden State, California, with so much fun and diversity and lifestyle. Maybe we can touch on a few things there of like what some of the attractions were grounded in reality, like the Bountiful Valley Farm and Pacific Wharf, et cetera.
That Michael Eisner had this idea that he loved, which we did a lot of development during the time that we were working with him, which at the time he called the workplace. He was really interested in how things were made and how things were created, the manufacturing process, building process, creation process. And I think some of that made its influence into California Adventure in terms of seeing, bread being made, seeing how wine is made. I think those things, chocolate, I think those were the beginnings of his interest in that kind of behind the scenes of how things are created. And he was able to execute them here under the California theme.
Right. And then also downplaying the Disney stories and characters, right? That was a very specific motivation, making that different.
Yeah, I think that, again, it goes back to that idea, that theory that we should keep this place very differentiated from Disneyland. So that was downplayed. Of course, I think the discovery was that our fans are huge fans of Disneyland, of characters, of Disney stories, and they were big fans of Disney California Adventure too. It had most of the top attractions in the entire resort are at Disney California Adventure. But that idea of the heart wasn't all there. So a lot of what we've done over the years is to bring that Disney heart, bring that Disney story there. And it turns out, I guess I could say that guests just don't get enough of it, because it certainly didn't decline Disneyland in any way.
The one thing that adults like a lot that differentiates from Disneyland is
the experiment of allowing people to have alcoholic beverages in Disney California Adventure, and it worked fine. I think a lot of the fears over the years that it might create crime or unrest inside the park, might create a dangerous environment. I think that people found that it was just a part of the people that are there are still part of a very family-oriented, very social environment. And people enjoyed being able to pair a wine with a great dish at one of the restaurants, or be able to stroll along the street with a beverage or something. So I think it worked out great. I think that the Epcot experience had great influence on that decision, but it had never been made next to Disneyland before. So it was a very cautious decision, but it seems like it worked fine.
Yeah. Well, what were the most popular attractions in the park in those early days, would you say?
It's interesting to remember that Disney California Adventure had some of the most breakthrough, amazing attractions in the whole resort, most popular attractions in the resort when it opened. It had California Screamin', which was really the largest, most dynamic exterior coaster that we had ever built before. It's still amazingly popular, and it really creates that setting along the boardwalk, along the lake. There was Grizzly River Run, fantastic water ride, lots of fun, still very popular, celebrates the outdoor, kayaking and water culture of California's recreation. And most important, I would say, in terms of breakthroughs, was Soarin' over California, which is such an amazing technology. It had to be figured out entirely by Imagineers, both how it would work and also how to film it, which was a big challenge. And subsequently has been built in Florida. We built one in Shanghai, and we built one in Tokyo, and we've introduced Soarin' around the world. So Soarin' was just amazingly popular, and one of the key reasons to come to Disney California Adventure as well.
Well, and as with all Disney parks, you all did not waste any time adding new shows and attractions shortly thereafter. Can you walk us through some of those?
Yeah, there was a great interest in expanding once the park opened, and bringing new elements into it. And it really, one of the edges that it started to pick up early was it was one of the first venues that really celebrated characters from the Pixar brand. And that was exciting to have kind of a fresh take on a lot of these things. So A Bug's Land and Flicks Fun Fair opened, celebrating those characters. That was great. I think it was 2002. Then Aladdin, which is a musical show, which played for many years and was incredibly popular. And people would just return to the park to see the Aladdin show. So that was a great piece by Live Entertainment, started in 2003. And then we brought the very successful Twilight Zone Tower of Terror from Orlando up to California and debuted it in 2004. Brought Monsters, Inc. in with Mike and Sully to the rescue in 2006. This is a lot of expansion in a relatively short period of time to expand the park and add new things. And then a true innovator, as well as a landmark, I think, in the reinvention of the way we thought about Disney California Adventure was Toy Story Midway Mania. It both brought a higher level of Disney theming to Paradise Pier, as well as interactivity and attraction. First time we'd ever done that to a degree. And again, a real celebration of the Toy Story characters, which are so amazingly popular.
Well, as president of Imagineering today, what do you look back on at this time and see as some of the most critical and important decisions that were made, given the limitations around it?
I think that we should never underestimate the value. It's going to sound mushy, but I'm going to say it anyway. We should never underestimate the value of love. Our guests love going to the parks. And the question becomes, as we worked on the expansion and subsequent to the original, the question becomes, what is the intangible thing that makes guests want to love Disneyland? And it's not just attractions, it's not just characters, it's the whole place. It's the connection to Walt, it's the connection to Disney, it's the comfort of walking around the hub through beautifully landscaped gardens and trees and music in the background and vehicles going by. And many of those intangibles were some of the things that we did with California Adventure when we went back in, because we realized that reason, they will always go there to see Soarin', you know that. They will always go there to see Tower of Terror and the other things. But how do you make them love it and want to spend a lot of time there, which is so important to what a Disney park is. And those things, I think, probably needed more attention, we realized, after opening. And that's where we took it.
Well, thank you, Bob, for taking us back to the beginning and reminiscing a little bit and making us all look forward to coming back soon.
Thank you. And we look forward to seeing everybody back to Disneyland soon.
Awesome. Well, even as the park was adding new attractions in the first year after it opened, there were bigger plans afoot. Plans that would not only expand the park, but radically reimagine it. To talk about the new direction, let's bring on Portfolio Creative Executive Tom Fitzgerald, who was part of the team. Tom, how and why did the park need re-envisioning, and how did you go about it?
Disney's California Adventure grew up in a very different time than Disneyland did. And we live in a world of instant feedback now. And our fans who love Disneyland so much were not shy about telling us what was working and what was not working for the park. And that's great, because we don't design the park for us, we design the park for them. And what we kept hearing over and over again was, we want more Disneyland. And as Imagineers, we had to figure out, well, what exactly does that mean? And fortunately, our parks do an enormous amount of research, and we did numerous focus groups to dig deeper into, we want more Disneyland. And what we discovered eventually was some themes that kept reemerging. And what our guests were telling us was, we want more family, we want more Disney, and we want it to be more immersive. And as you heard from Bob Weiss, we immediately got to work adding new things to the park to build on those things. More family-friendly attractions that had no height restriction, more Disney, and by more Disney, I mean more Disney Pixar, more of the expansive Disney at the time. And also we began to shift the emphasis in the park's DNA from a little less emphasis on California and more emphasis on Disney. And all the things that we added were in fact really well received by our guests. In fact, the park had some of the most popular attractions at the resort. And yet, the park was not as popular as Disneyland and was not performing in the way that we expected and needed it to work. And what we saw from a behavior standpoint was that guests were coming into the park, cherry picking their favorite attractions, and then heading back over to Disneyland. And so Disneyland was getting overcrowded, particularly at night, where everybody morphed over to see the fireworks and parade. And we had a huge congestion problem on our hands. And that's where Bob Iger stepped in and said, fix it. And so we assembled our top team of Imagineers and really set out to say, okay, let's focus on that third thing that our guests asked us for. How do we make the park more immersive? And so from the front door to the expansion pads in the back, we looked at every area of the park and said, how do we shift our time frame from today? Because the today of California is outside our park. You can see that anywhere. How do we make it more Disney? How do we find time frames that were more romantic, nostalgic, more comfortable for our guests? And we took our cue, ironically, from the entry plaque at Disneyland, where Walt had said, here you leave today and enter the world of yesterday, tomorrow, and fantasy. And we took that to heart as we looked through everything in the park. So we made changes everywhere, really. You're going to hear more from Lynn about how we changed the front door. But, we looked at areas like Condor Flats, where we have our very popular Soarin' Over California, and said it was an authentic desert, high desert environment. But that meant it was a desert. It was hot. There was no shade. And it was a little industrial. And so we pulled Grizzly Peaks forward and made that area more part of Grizzly Peaks, so we could have more of sort of the national park feel, more nostalgic feel, more shade. We looked at the area where we had Golden Dreams and we pulled that into Paradise Pier. And we shifted from a story of California's history to a story of a Little Mermaid. So we went everywhere through the park and tried to make it more guest-friendly, more comfortable. And ultimately, we set up a huge presentation in Imagineering with artwork and models of all the areas that we presented to Bob Iger. And that was what that presentation and what he saw there gave him the confidence that we had a vision that would transform this park into what it is today. Of course, the transformation was not an instant one. It would take place over 5 years. But really, the first big turning point, I think the first thing that really changed the park for our guests was the nighttime entertainment spectacular World of Color that Stephen Davison did with his team. That really launched the park into its future. And then you'll hear later how the capper, the cherry on the sundae, was really how we took a bit of California car culture and turned it into Cars Land.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. That was great. Well, we will transition over to Stephen Davison, Executive of Parades and Spectaculars.
Hi, Leslie. How's it going?
Good to see you. It's been a while.
Good to see you. It has been a while.
Well, I know when we talked some time back, you said Bob Iger gave you some important directives, which was no pressure. So take us back a little bit about the genesis of World of Color.
As Tom was saying, the park was in need of a nighttime spectacular. We needed something to entertain our guests at night because everyone was going from California Adventure back over to Disneyland because that's where all the nighttime entertainment was. So the park challenged us to come up with a big spectacular that was out in the lagoon. It had a few caveats. One was it couldn't have any people. It needed to operate multiple times a night, and it had to be spectacular. So with that, we set out and started to look at the water itself, how we could take the water and turn it into something like we've never seen it before. And so we studied a lot of different fountains around the world, and we really noticed nobody had a color fountain anywhere. They had light, colored lights and things, but no one had ever integrated something the way that we had looked at. So we started to play around with it, and the idea of World of Color was born. And originally, Little Mermaid was supposed to open the park. So we were poised as number 2, and suddenly we got ratcheted up to the first position. And that's when Bob Iger said to me, he goes, no pressure, but you have to relaunch this park. You have to show the world that we are committed. We are making a big statement here, and we're going to make a big change in that park itself. So we spent, it was about 3 years actually developing, creating new fountains that had the motion. The teams were spectacular. They created brand new lighting systems. We were the first in the world to take an actual lighting console. And we didn't have fountain programmers, but we had lighting programmers. And they're like, well, a moving light is just a fountain. So they actually created a platform to move fountains in a way that no one had ever done before. And it's now the industry standard. So we're always on the front edge of things like that, which I think is great. But really, the park, as Tom was saying, also wanted to have more Disney in it, and this was a way to do it, but do it in a different way. We had done it with fireworks, we had painted in the sky. Now we were going to go from the ground up and bring the magic of Paradise Pier and bring it to life and show our guests that Disney is this kind of liquid world that can come to life and bring you all sorts of entertainment, things that make you laugh, things that make you cry, and things that bring you adventure. You know, it was the first show we ever did something as dramatic as, you know, taking a character like Mufasa, and in The Lion King, you know, he loses his life, and actually do that in a show. And that had a huge emotional impact. And that's what we really wanted. We wanted to give our guests something that was equivalent to everything we had at Disneyland, but so over the top that it would be here and be changeable forevermore.
And how did you come up with the lineup of characters and stories for it?
You know, we looked at initially it was music, and secondary, we wanted to do a lot of Pixar because Pixar wasn't represented in the parks very much. So we started to look at that and started to do a seamless journey. Because if you watch the show, it actually goes from one character, something like a leaf will fall in from Colors of the Wind, and up pops Heimlich, who is there, who sees the rain, and then the rain brings you into April showers, and then suddenly it turns into the ocean, and there we are into parts of the Caribbean. But a lot of it was the journeys of the main characters and the main music that people loved over time. It was kind of the evergreen properties that we were showcasing.
And what would you say were some of the biggest challenges in staging all of that? It's pretty unprecedented.
Well, you have to learn it. I always say when you have a giant machine the size of a football field with 1,200 fountains and you've never done something like this before, the testing proved out that we could do it, but we'd never, ever tried it. So a lot of it was just trial and error. There was one effect we did where the laser programmer just had a laser going and then the fountains were just moving. And I saw the water go up and hit the top of the laser, but the fountains weren't lit. And it created this beautiful thing in the sky I'd never seen before. And so we made it the opening of the show. You just see these jets go up in darkness, but they hit the top of the laser. And suddenly you had this beautiful thing going across and no one had a clue how we did it. Everyone was saying, what is this new effect? Where does it come from? And I go, well, it's top secret, but it was very simple. Actually, it's like chocolate and peanut butter. It was an accident that showed us, oh, wow, there's something really spectacular. And we're really going to highlight that. So a lot of it was just understanding what we had, how to use it. And as Iger said to me, he goes, don't be afraid, just go for it. You know, don't be, I know you're subtle in the beginning of the shows, don't, just go for it. And we did. And by the end of it, we brought back the fire because everyone just loved that giant fire effect. So,
well, that's a very nice direction to be given when you have to create something that's so important, right?
Yeah, it was scary when we first pitched it to the board, and Bob Iger, he said, "When?" I'm like, "When what?" Well, when can we have it? And so that was exciting and also terrifying because you're like, okay, now step up and here we go. And we did. I have the best teams, and they really give it their all.
And I remember seeing a lot of that behind the scenes footage from you guys, and looked like you had a lot of fun.
We did. I think you have to infuse that everyone's part of every show we do. I mean, they have, from whoever's doing what, I don't care. You are part of that show, and we infuse that with everybody because if somebody drops the ball along the line, it's not going to happen. So by giving it to everybody, everyone owns it. That giant team photo at the end shows it, all 1,250 people that were there. This was theirs. We all put this together. We made a wonderful thing that still performs to this day. Well, when we're up.
And how soon in that process did you get a sense that it was going to be a big hit with guests and it would pretty much transform the very nature of Disney California Adventure?
We were rehearsing one night and the electrical parade was rehearsing and went by. And I went to one of the team captains that I know and I go, can the kids come over and watch the show? Because we'd never really had an audience. So we had the whole electrical parade cast come over and watch the show and they were wowed by it. And they're a very straightforward audience. They will tell you if they like something or not. And they cheered and roared and cried and did everything we thought it was going to do. So I wasn't as nervous at that point. But yeah, it was when you're doing something of that magnitude, it's just like doing an attraction. You always take that breath, and when everyone shows up to give their comments, you're like, okay. And a really funny story, we actually had every executive there. They were there to review the show. And I'm signaling the stage manager to start. And she's like, no, keep going. I'm like, what? We found out that somebody had cut the electrical wires way over in one of the buildings. And so all the power had gone out. So we could not run the show.
My God.
So I'm like, well, I can only tap dance for so long, because then you're kind of, well, it was fine. They ended up fixing it very quickly because we had the head of maintenance there who went over and had a few words, and it was fixed very quickly. But you run into stuff like that where you're just unexpected things happen, but you roll with it, and you do your best.
That's crazy. Well, thank you, Steve, for sharing your stories and for making such an amazing attraction for everybody to be enjoying. I know personally, I look forward to going back and when everything's open and seeing the next show.
Thank you. It's coming.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Well, there was no missing the fact that the park had undergone dramatic changes because for the first time, Imagineers had an opportunity to completely redo the entrance to a Disney park. What's the story behind Buena Vista Street? Where did the idea come from? For that, we've invited Lynn Itamura, interior design executive and the lead interior designer for the project, to join us. Hello, Lynn.
Hi, Leslie. Good afternoon.
I'm a big fan of Buena Vista Street, so I'd love to hear your stories and kind of how it all started.
Well, as Tom mentioned, one of the comments was make Disney California Adventure more like Disneyland. And, we were scratching our heads trying to figure out what that really meant. And what we ended up doing was analyzing what was our equivalent in Disneyland, and that was Main Street, which was the idealized, romanticized version of Walt's early childhood on a farm near Marceline, Missouri. And so we thought, okay, what do we do in Buena Vista Street? And in order to create the companion to Disneyland Main Street, we came up with Walt arriving in Los Angeles in 1923, up into his journey leading you down Buena Vista Street to Carthay Circle Theater, which was the premiere of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1937. And we created different neighborhoods and idealized neighborhoods of what Walt where he would have lived and where he would have worked. So on the left block, we have what we call more of the residences. So they were more mom and pop, more quaint shops, a cafe, an ice cream parlor, and a candy shop. And on the right block, we created more of a commercial zone, which we had the Five and Dime and a grand department store that was very typical of Los Angeles at that time.
And what was kind of the I would say the approval process or the design process behind it to get it all sort of spun up and getting everybody excited about it? Was it an instant pitch, or was there a lot of iteration?
There was a lot of iteration, but it was finding what that story was. And then once we figured out what that story was, everything started to fall into place. And then it became, how do we edit back all the material that we had? And part of this, we combed through a lot of photographic libraries, as well as personal collections of photographs, as well as our team went out and we actually did some research of buildings that were still in existence that were around in LA at the time that Walt came to Los Angeles. And that was important because it gave us a lot of context for color palette, the scale of the buildings, because the scale of the buildings is very important, because the scale of the buildings then are very different from what you see now. And it was far more intimate. There were several of us who worked on the project who grew up and were raised in Los Angeles and had a lot of very fond childhood memories that we infused into the design and the DNA of designing Buena Vista Street. And it also, we also constantly asked ourselves, do you think what would Walt have seen? And if he had seen this, how do we infuse this? And how do we make this authentic to create a place that resonated and felt sincere and authentic?
Right. Well, it's funny because just a quick little story. I grew up with photographs of my grandfather and Walt in Southern California when my grandfather was invited out by Walt, to work on Alice in Cartoonland. So I grew up with a lot of the photographs of that era, right, around the house of Walt and Ub together, Ub Iwerks. And when I walked down Buena Vista Street, it was really cool to kind of see it all sort of come to life, and like all the little hints to Elias and Co. and just those that great 30s look. So the centerpiece is the Carthay Circle Theater, which was torn down years ago in LA, in Hollywood. How did you go about recreating that?
That was very challenging. So we had a lot of historical reference and photographs of the exterior, but there were literally maybe 2 or 3 that existed of the interior. And as much as we searched, even some archival films, we couldn't find anything. So our decision was to mimic the exterior style. And our storyline, since Carthay was so important to our history, we decided to create what would essentially be the interior salon space of the theater. In 1901, it's a separate entrance, and it's a very discreet entrance. It's unmarked, similar to Club 33. And we wanted to create a very relaxed and graceful space that had, it gave a nod to being a club, yet it wasn't as stiff, it wasn't dark, it wasn't smoky. The soft hues in there, the lighting, and we wanted to complement it with jazz music of the 30s and 40s. So it was a place that would be of respite for our guests throughout the day that were club members that could come in and have a lovely meal, have some drinks, and just relax.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite spots in all of it. Disneyland, Disney California Adventure, I love it all. But 1901 is one of my favorite restaurants, or favorite, places to visit, I should say.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And the restaurant itself, we have some little touches here and there of honoring Snow White. So the murals that are in the cupola on the upper floor features the background of the cottage scene of Snow White and Seven Dwarfs. The design was inspired by some of those great Hollywood restaurants at the time, Piero's and Chasen's. And it was the idea that that it was a place that you, in true Hollywood fashion, you could, the way the seating was laid out was you were there to see and be seen. And there were some, what we call the power seats and the power booths that would be there, very similar to the dining of that time. But it was all to be in a celebratory mood of what the post-party would have been after the premiere of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Nice. Well, it's definitely a fun place to visit. It's making me hungry. Well, Lynn, thank you very much for being here and for all that you've done for Buena Vista Street, and for making a lot of people very happy when they walk into the park.
Well, we wanted to create a destination for people to come to, but also seek out and just spend some time hanging around just in the neighborhood. And it was a true passion project for many of us.
That's great. Well, thanks, Lynn, for being here, and hope to see you again soon.
Okay, thanks, Leslie.
You're welcome. Well, perhaps the crowning achievement of the relaunch of Disney California Adventure in 2012 was Cars Land. Along for our drive through the 16-acre land that seemed to redefine the term immersion are the project's executive producer and now retired Imagineer, Kathy Mangum, the project's executive creative director and soon-to-be retired Imagineer Kevin Rafferty, and the creative director of franchise management and parks integration for Pixar Animation Studios and Walt Disney Animation Studios, Roger Gould. Roger, I hope there are no plans for you to retire.
Not anytime soon. I'm still trying to hold Kevin back, but I don't know if he's going.
Aren't we all? Kevin, let's start our trip with Kevin and a land that began his development as just car land. There was no S in it, right?
There was no S, Leslie. It wasn't even Cars Land then. At that time, I was working on a whole new land for our California themed park, inspired by California car culture. And I had no idea at that time Pixar was working on a movie about cars, named Cars. I mean, what are the odds? You can't even believe this stuff. And so I grabbed my colleague, Robert Coulter, and we were working on Toy Story Midway Mania, and said, hey, let's go up to Pixar and see what we can learn about their new movie Cars. And maybe if we go up there, we can be inspired by something they're working on that may lend itself to creating a new attraction or something for Carland. And so we went up there, and after the movie pitch, we fell absolutely in love with the movie and the characters. And it wasn't long after that we went back to Imagineering, and we actually had the first pass layout of Radiator Springs Racers completed. And at that time, Carland was well on the road to becoming Carsland.
After you got over that initial shock of adding an S to it, tell me about your Route 66 trip. Did you go on that? You went on that, right?
Yeah. Kathy and Roger and I and some team members went on that. That was an amazing trip because, we had to design interiors and places in the land that we had not seen in the movie. So we had to kind of make all that stuff up. And so we went on the research road trip. Research is everything. And we had a ball. I'll invite Roger and Kathy to jump in on this and talk about our experience.
Well, I think, Kevin, you're absolutely right. We had so much fun. It was one of those rare business trips that was a car trip. We drove it. And I think that was interesting in and of itself. But we saw these wonderful spaces, but maybe even what stuck more with me were the people of the Mother Road that we met. And many of the characters of the film are based on some of these real people. And so it just was this holistic dive into the film with some of the filmmakers, as well as the place the film was based on. And we had a ball, like Kevin said, but it made us add so much texture and depth to the land that without that trip and without knowing those people and seeing those places, I don't think we would have gotten. It was really great.
I totally agree with you, Kathy. I thought we'd be seeing, sort of authentic materials and things we were going to have to recreate or build the buildings from the movie, but make them feel real. But it was really the hospitality of the people, the warmth of everyone on Route 66. And we really got to be the beneficiaries of Cars movie. When the Pixar film team went on their road trip for research, they met a lot of these folks, but they hadn't made the movie yet. We were like on the Cars Victory Lap. Everywhere we went, everyone on Route 66 was so excited about Cars. People had small and sometimes giant shrines to the movie. And I think that really affected us, just the spirit of hospitality and warmth. And we really wanted to figure out a way to infuse that in the land because it really reflects Lightning McQueen's experience in the movie. He comes to Radiator Springs and he finds this community, and the hospitality and warmth is really what makes it a special place.
Well, so how did the layout for the movie start to become the layout for the land? I mean, that's just a huge process. Kathy, you want to take us through a little bit of that? It was this great blend or this meld of what Kevin and Robert had started with Radiator Springs Racers, which one thing that just kept me amazed throughout the entire project is that we really changed that very little. That's one of those attractions that once it was locked in, we really only changed it as we changed the site. It fit into the site. And so to your point, how did we match that movie? Well, we built a mountain out in the middle of, Anaheim on an old parking lot, the old employee parking lot where I used to park and Kevin used to park. We built a mountain, but then we really had to study not just the layout of the film and how little Radiator Springs is laid out and which buildings come in which order, but we also had to think about a human scale. We had to think about these were guests walking down a street, not driving down a street. We had to think about adding a little more shade than what's in the movie, but the shade the trees and the selection of the material wanted to really match
or feel like it fit into the movie. So we weren't going to go with a tropical palette, for example, but we really had to think about, we had to work with Roger's team on downsizing doorways that normally in a Cars world would be a car-sized doorway, but that was going to feel very intimidating or really a little more imposing to human guests than we wanted to feel. So we really, I think, dissected that movie and then had to think about, all right, these are guests, these are human people walking through, and how do we make it different, fit to them, but still be very much in tune with the movie? And Roger, anything you want to add to that?
You're absolutely right. And I think it's fun, like we're called Four Corners, which is where we see Luigi's and Ramon's and Flo's and Sally's and Lizzie's. That is just exactly the way it's organized in the film. And we did a lot of other things. So there's the street between, that Four Corners and the courthouse, and we kind of foreshortened it and compressed it. There are a lot of apparent, sort of storefronts there, but they're all foreshortened. But and Where's Mater's? He's sort of on the outside of town, so we put him down the street. But the core of it, that shot down Route 66. We really were able to recreate that. And the mountain. I remember seeing the very first small scale model, thinking, well, someone's going to tell us no. Someone's going to say, that's fine, but you're not building that. Come on, be serious. And then we went to the medium scale model, and the full scale model was like, oh yeah, we're building a mountain range. It's just one of the most extraordinary things ever.
You know what, Roger, I just wanted to add to what you said is what was amazing about that is we did faithfully recreate Radiator Springs and all the places from the movie, but we also got to invent a lot of places that were not in the movie that had to fit seamlessly into the town. We always like to say if you were a camera going down Main Street toward the courthouse and you turned right, you would get to Stanley's Oasis because it was always there. So it was really a blast to be able to make up new stories that weren't necessarily in the movie, but that complemented the movie.
And that came right from the Route 66 road trip, right? Because we knew that there was no space in town for what would be a huge queue for racers. And we were going literally to these ghost towns, to these small sort of forgotten places on Route 66. And we realized that could be the story basis for, hey, what was the original settlement? When we know that Stanley had originally found this, magical water out in the desert and then created some kind of little town. So we said, okay, well, maybe this was his original Stanley's Oasis. And then it was so fun to expand that. And then that whole storytelling ended up becoming the foundation for a Pixar short that we made, Time Travel Mater.
And what fascinated me, I'm just blown away by the level of detail. It just seemed like your level of detail and the hidden things that are in Pixar films and the bulbs on the trees that are cones. And you went way over the top there, and it was just so fun to walk through it. I think more than most people even realize as they're walking down the street. Like Kevin, when we were walking down for the Pixar or the Imagineering story, you were showing me all these things. It's so great. Was that something that just kind of came as time went on? You just sort of kept, let's add this, let's add that.
Like I said, we were pretty faithful to recreating the town from the film, but we did have to make a few things up. But, it's all about the detail, Leslie. It's all about the detail on the land and, things that you don't know if people are going to notice, but they do. And the part of the reality is it really helps to make that make-believe believable, right? Cars Land, reflecting and inspired by the Cars movie, is really kind of a parallel universe where the car characters are really people, right? And so all of the details and all of the kind of little parallel universe things like the cones and things like that are drinking cups in the human world, for example. I remember when we opened Cars Land, we had the cone drinking cups with the straws. I don't know if you remember those, but they sold out right away because that was kind of the Cars equivalent of a drink cup. And so those details just kept adding into it and making it more believable and more real and more fun.
Yeah, there's a carification of everything, right? Because cars don't have hands. So it's kind of a push button world. But then we have flowers. We have a lot of amazing landscape, but we also made artificial flowers that happen to look like, taillights. We have, taillight caverns where the stalagmites and stalactites happen to look like giant oversized 50 sort of muscle car taillight. So there's just so many fun places where we got to push that fantasy, but it blends in with this, believable reality. And I think that's what makes it so special, is it feels like a legitimate place that, like in the film, sort of got added to decade after decade.
Right. And you were able to use some of the CG elements from the film, right, to inform the real physical land?
Yeah, well, it's funny, when we were building all the cars for racers, at one point in the model shop, we joked that we had more automobile in production than they did in Detroit, because the whole place was just packed with all these full-size Cars characters. It was just amazing. And those came straight from the digital data from the film.
Well, having documented the making of Cars in the Pixar story, and then documenting the making of the land, that was a circle for me. So I enjoyed it, and spending time with all of you guys. And Kathy, do you have any advice for Kevin on retiring?
No, I don't, because I know he's going to just love it as much as I do. I shouldn't say that for those who are still working, but I know he's going to do great. I'm proud of him.
Right on.
Awesome. Well, Roger, stay back, Roger.
All right. I've got a few more projects to finish first, but I just want to say that it was just such an extraordinary pleasure and honor, really, to work with Kevin and Kathy and the whole Imagineering team. To see our movie brought to life in this epic way that really did, it was this sort of core of transforming California Adventure. It's something that we were proud of then, and we just continue to just really be so grateful and equally proud of this amazing experience and this amazing place that we all can't wait to go back to.
Exactly. Hopefully soon.
Yeah, hope so.
Well, thank you, everybody. Really good to see you, and appreciate everything you've done for everybody. So much great work.
Thank you, Leslie.
Right.
Thanks so much.
Okay, the big 5-year relaunch is over with the opening of Buena Vista Street and Cars Land. So what happens next? To answer that question, I'd like to bring in Jeanette Lomboy, Walt Disney Imagineering Site Portfolio Executive for the Disneyland Resort. Hi, Jeanette. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Leslie. So I actually think the relaunch of Disney California Adventure and the opening of Cars Land really just elevated our game for the park. As you guys know, Walt famously said that Disneyland would never be completed. And I think we Imagineers have taken that to heart. And so at that point, it was like, well, let's look at Disney California Adventure and say, we can still be in California and tell the story that is very centered in a place that is unique to us, that tells the story of innovation, adventure, discovery, diversity. But we could also bring our unique Disney stories here and make it that much richer, right? It's a win-win. So I think this just sort of gave us the freedom to do that. And as a perfect example, we were looking at California Screamin' one day, and California Screamin' is one of the highest and was one of the highest rated attractions since we opened. It's a great thrill ride. And someone would say, why would you even touch that? Well, there's not really a unique Disney story layered on top of California Screamin'. And it just so happened that Incredibles 2 was in production, and we knew we had an awesome score. So one day a group of Imagineers went out. We took the score, Michael Giacchino's score, put some headsets on. All we had to do was just ride the ride with the headsets and the music, and went, wow, that would be amazing. And with just music and saying, what can you tell? What kind of story would you tell in 90 seconds? Can we give it that much story? Yes, it's still California. Yes, we're being honest. This is a pierside location, but I think we could elevate that. And today we've got the Incredicoaster, and I would tell anybody, and I think everyone would say, just adding that layer of what is uniquely Disney gives it humor, gives it magic, gives it whimsy. That thrill and the giggles, because I cannot go on that ride without laughing the entire time, really just makes for an incredible combination. So we're still California, we're still about adventure discovery, but we're uniquely Disney because we can bring our characters and our stories to life in a really special way. What's a great counterbalance to Disneyland, which Disneyland is about fantasy. It's about these imaginary places that we bring our guests to, and that's how Walt created it. Disney California Adventure is the perfect counterpoint to that. There's a vibrancy. It's about California. It's not telling you to go into this made-up imaginary world back in time. It's fresh, it's contemporary, and I think that's what you see through the lens of all the rich stories that we tell there that are uniquely Disney within the park, and it is very much about the place that we're in.
I agree. Well, we all know that live entertainment shows and events play a big role in every Disney park. And as we've already seen, such is the case with Disney California Adventure. But this park has taken entertainment to new levels. Here to talk about some of the unique festivals and events that have been staged at Disney California Adventure is Susanna Tubert, creative director of live entertainment at the Disneyland Resort. Hi, Susanna.
Hi, Leslie. Great to see you.
For many of our guests and cast members, these festivals have contributed to forging the park's identity, and in doing so, helped differentiate it from Disneyland. So when and how did all that begin?
Well, in 2013, the live entertainment teams and I were asked to develop a first-time Christmas celebration from a Latin American perspective for Disney California Adventure Park. And through a great collaboration between the producers, the show directors, writers, art directors, music composers, we determined that the perfect cultural ambassadors for a festive Latino street party should be the Three Caballeros. So to this day, our show, which is called Disney Viva Navidad, really continues to be one of the highlights of the holiday season at the Disneyland Resort at Wide. And the reason why I think it was such a milestone is that it was the first cultural entertainment experience at Disney California Adventure Park that cracked the code on something that Jeanette just mentioned, which is how can our products be both culturally authentic and uniquely Disney? So in this show, the character of Panchito brings along a troupe of authentic mariachi musicians and folklorico dancers and these huge, colorful mojiganga puppets that one can traditionally see, making their way down the cobblestone streets of the little towns of Mexico. And then Jose Carioca says, well, I have a surprise for you. And he brings out this entourage of samba dancers and percussionists. But what's really important and key to the success of the show is that the characters of Donald Duck, Mickey, and Minnie represent our non-Latino guests who enjoy getting caught up in the fun and this uplifting cultural celebration. And while it may not necessarily be their own, nonetheless, they're touched, their hearts are touched with this universal message of togetherness in the holiday season.
So once you identified Paradise Gardens as a great destination for cultural immersive celebrations, what came after that?
So since Lunar New Year is widely celebrated in Southern California by the Chinese, Vietnamese, and Korean communities, we also transformed Paradise Gardens into this magical Lunar New Year setting with gold and red lanterns, interactive traditions like a wishing wall. We have music and dance performances on the bandstand, calligraphy artists, and of course, a delicious food and beverage menu that is hugely popular with our guests. And the signature piece is called Mulan's Lunar New Year Procession. And again, the character of Mulan is a cultural ambassador that welcomes you into her story.
So why don't you tell us about festival holidays?
Well, 3 years after we opened Viva Navidad, we had the premiere of the largest festival, which we called Festival Holidays. It goes all the way from Carthay Circle all the way to Paradise Gardens, but also includes Pacific Wharf. And this celebration includes Hanukkah, Diwali, Kwanzaa, Three Kings, Christmas, Navidad. Our guests love to come to both parks during the season because, again, as Jeanette called out, when they want to experience the charm and joy of the traditional Christmas, but at DCA, there's a vibrancy that speaks to the cultural richness of California. So it's really quite amazing to stroll down this festival. And then when you turn a corner, experience at any given moment one of these cultural holidays brought to life through, a fun program of original Disney atmosphere shows like Mickey's Happy Holidays and the Toy Drummers. But then you might hear the sound of a klezmer band called Mostly Kosher, or listen to a Black a cappella singing group, or Bollywood dancers, or Jingle Bells in Spanish and English by the Mariachi Divas. So it's really pretty amazing. And then to end the night with the Sunset Concert Series and the Spectacular World of Color, you can't wish for a more delicious time during the holiday season.
I think it's interesting that the springboard for all these festivals has been and continues to be a range of cultural celebrations that are very diverse and are also universal, right?
Yeah.
How did the Pixar film Coco and the Disney Studios live action Lion King allow you to continue to expand the theme of relevancy at DCA?
So Coco, as Roger Gould can attest, was initially supposed to be a one-off synergy activation. But when I learned that the main theme of the film was about family, it really fueled my passion to develop an annual celebration that could be inspired by the spirit of Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, and the everlasting bonds of family. So in this instance, we renamed Paradise Garden Plaza de la Familia, the Plaza of the Family. And we found ways to educate guests on the significance of this Mexican tradition and also introduce them to the marvelous magical realism of the film Coco. And for example, we displayed a large-scale version of a typical tree of life next to a table with cards that our guests can use to write a message to their loved ones and then hang it on the memory wall. There's also mariachi music and craft making and really beautiful photo locations inspired by the film. And in addition to that, we built a whole musical show called A Musical Celebration of Coco, where the storytellers of Plaza de la Familia recount through narration, through song and dance and puppetry, Miguel's journey from the land of the living to the land of the dead. Now, with the live action version of Lion King, it was challenging because we couldn't use any of the animated characters. So what we did is draw inspiration to create a show called Tale of the Lion King, and essentially develop a unique mythology around the stories that draw inspiration from Africa, and informed every aspect stylistically of the show, from the story theater approach to the scripting, the musical arrangements, the costumes, the sets, all of that.
Well, thanks so much for all that you're doing there. It's very exciting, and I can't wait to come back as soon as it's open to see what you have coming up next.
I can't wait to see you there.
So if you're following along chronologically, the next major attraction to open at Disney California Adventure was Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. But we're going to set that aside for a minute to chat about a part of Disney California that, with two of the most popular attractions in the park, was already successful. So why change it? To answer that, let's bring aboard Imagineering Executive Producer Jeffrey Shaver-Moskowitz, Concept Design Director Tracy Nose, and welcome back Roger Gould.
Leslie, good.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So Jeff, why retheme Paradise Pier?
Well, as we said, this was a great land with two huge attractions for Disney California Adventure. We had California Screamin' here, and a Pixar anchor to our land was also Toy Story Midway Mania. So when we looked at a lot of things that were coming up in this time frame, we had Incredibles 2 coming out, an exciting new Incredibles story. As Jeanette had mentioned, that we took a look at what that feels like to have an Incredibles adventure on California Screamin'. That felt right with Toy Story Midway Mania already there. We started to see this picture being painted of what it would be like to make this a uniquely Disneyland by bringing Pixar stories to life and anchoring it, still in this California story of seaside piers, but also a very California story of Pixar and its animated films. And so we saw so much opportunity to bring so many new characters to California Adventure for guests to be able to have their experiences with some of their favorite characters.
Roger, how did Imagineering and Pixar Animation Studios collaborate on this?
Well, we got invited to a brainstorm with Jeff and the team to start talking about what it would mean to rebrand this whole section of Paradise Pier as Pixar Pier. And actually, it was really a little startling because Pixar isn't a story, right? It isn't, Cars or Toy Story or Incredible. It's our studio. And so the first thing we really had to wrap our heads around was, well, how do we celebrate the studio? How do we use that as a way to sort of build a frame around all these experiences? And it really boiled down to this idea of creating neighborhoods, that around each attraction, we couldn't make, a 12-acre Cars Land, but could we actually make a little bit of immersive storytelling with Toy Story Boardwalk, wrapping around that, the Inside Out headquarters, and most especially Incredibles Park, which Tracy was an extraordinary partner on.
Well, Tracy, tell us a little bit more from your perspective.
For me, working with Pixar is always really fun. I think just as a general artist, artists have this almost shorthand. A lot of the times where we get a little bit nonverbal and we end up doing all of these drawings and stuff, because I think at heart we are problem solvers. So this idea of Incredibles Park sort of was born out of there's this emotional experience of going on a roller coaster. It's unpredictable, it's crazy, it's funny, it makes you laugh, you get the belly tingles. And what kind of expresses that with the Incredibles? And it was Jack. He's unpredictable. He has all of these crazy powers. And, I think that resonated with both, Imagineering team and with Pixar. It was a lot of fun to come up with that idea.
Putting a story on a roller coaster seemed kind of like an insane thing to try and do. And although I'd spent a lot of time DCA on Cars Land, Toy Story Mania, and as a guest, I'd always avoided riding Screaming California because not my thing. And I would always say, you'd have to pay me to ride that. And then I realized that that's what they were doing. So we went ahead and we wrote it to see, okay, how much time is there? Where could we put the storytelling? And when, Incredibles 2 really inspired us, as Tracy said, to focus on Jack and his powers. And when we thought about each of these beats where we could have the family chasing after Jack, expressing a different power, it really felt like it could actually work.
And what about, the close relationship with Ralph Eggleston at Pixar for Incredibles 2?
That was actually such a great experience. While they were working on Incredibles 2, we had that team. Every idea was fresh in their minds. We did a lot of powwows where it was like, we have this problem to solve. How would we solve that? And we spent the day like drawing. It was really great working with production designer Ralph Eggleston, the rest of his team, and of course Brad Bird. With that, you also got the voice actors, because they're doing production on the film at the same time that we were doing the attraction. So you have this awesome kind of back and forth between everybody on both teams. And it was really kind of great.
And really credit to Tracy and her deep love and familiarity with the sort of mid-century modern kind of, Palm Springs kind of aesthetic, because we wanted to bring that and make this little Incredibles park, the whole thing, not just the coaster, really feel like it was part of that story.
Right. And what about Inside Out headquarters?
Well, we had, I don't know, there's in the coaster, there are these two helixes, these two circles that were basically blank pads. And so we started looking at that far pad and throwing around a lot of different stories from Pixar because there really was nothing prescriptive about it. And, I think we all just really love the emotions from Inside Out and the variety of that. And I think it really came down, we wanted to create something that was totally family friendly, zero height requirement. And those 5 characters are just so fun. And so the idea of making Inside Out headquarters just really felt appealing. And I think somewhere along the way, when we came with the idea of calling it the emotional whirlwind, it felt like it reflected many parents' experience at the Disney parks.
Yeah, one of the great things too, Pixar Pier was getting to bring all these stories to life for the first time. We had never done an Inside Out attraction. We had never done an Incredibles attraction. We had an opportunity to tell the stories of all these Pixar shorts that guests knew and loved, and get to represent our new characters. Coco was one of, Miguel was one of our newest characters, and we had no Coco representation out there in the park until we were able to bring it into Pixar Pier. So there were just so many opportunities to bring these characters that guests know and love, but hadn't had that opportunity to spend time with. And Pixar Pier painted the most beautiful canvas to be able to do that.
I think it reflects back to what we talked about earlier with Cars Land, which is this was about bringing in characters so that our guests could really kind of re-experience the emotional connection that they have to these characters and stories. As Jeanette said, California Screaming was always a fantastic coaster, I'm told, but it was really not specifically Disney. And so bringing in the Incredibles, bringing in the Inside Out characters, expanding the Toy Story Boardwalk with Jesse's Critter Carousel, and then all of the other Pixar characters that were represented in the entry and Pixar Promenade. It now gives it that kind of Disney DNA where you see these characters that you love, and it just brings an emotional heart to it.
Yeah, what do you all remember about the opening of all that, and your takeaway with how fans were enjoying it?
It was a crazy race to the finish. We were all there kind of all the time. And I know Tracy was basically living there in Incredibles Park.
I was.
Yeah, 1 to 2 weeks out, we still had wet cement and paint being done on facades and everything. So it was that race to the finish line, like Roger said, but getting to see those guests walk across that bridge for the first time underneath our Pixar Pier marquee, racing to the Incredicoaster. There's just a ton of emotions, and getting to see these kids walk across hand in hand with Frozone and Edna Mode and Mr. Incredible is just that's the moment you live for in these years long processes and bringing these things to life.
I feel like Imagineering in general is an exercise in delayed gratification, right? You spend a ton of time and heartache and your own personal time and blood, sweat, and tears going into these projects. And then when they're open, it's just like this completely different feeling. It's people are so excited. They're taking photos. They're marveling at all the things that you fought really hard to get in there. And it's such an incredible, no pun intended, feeling to finish and open a project and have people really respond to it.
It's amazing to see just how much passion and love our guests have for Pixar as a studio. And so fun to come under that archway at Pixar Pier and see the Pixar lamp up there nodding and welcoming us as we come in. And just amazing to see how much guests just loved it and embraced it. And, obviously really special for all of us at Pixar to actually have our name on a whole neighborhood, a whole land in Disney California Adventure.
Yeah, very exciting. Well, thank you guys for all that you've done for continuing the Pixar spirit in DCA. Pixar Pier debuted in 2018. A year before that, Imagineers tinkered with an attraction that, although only a little more than a decade old, had already become a huge favorite with park guests. So why mess with success? Well, this change had a little more in store than just a reimagining of one attraction. Big plans were afoot, and this was the opener, but that didn't make it any easier. To talk about this particular mission, we have Imagineering portfolio producer John Morrow and interior design / art director Claire Weiss, who is with us from Germany right now, where she is currently working on the next Disney Cruise Line ship, the Disney Wish. Welcome, you all.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, I'm starting to sound like a broken record now, but why would you change an already immensely successful attraction?
Yeah, I wondered the same thing when I was first asked to do this project too. I can remember actually getting a phone call from Bob Weiss saying, "Hey, John, I have this project thinking of doing with Tower and changing it and adding a Guardians overlay." And I was like, what? What are we doing? Why? And we need to do it all in about a little over a year. So that was sort of the beginning of it. But I'm incredibly grateful that opportunity and to do what we did was pretty heroic. But I think the whole thing can really be attributed to Joe Rohde, who is the creative lead on it from the start, and walking around with Michael Kohlglazer, who is the president of the Disneyland Resort at the time. And I think it was just about how do we get some really impactful, some new, popular, more relevant IP into the park and do it in a way that we can really make an impact on attracting visitors and new visitors. It's really about how do you open up to a new audience.
And I think, to add to what John said, unlike Disneyland, which Jeanette talked about a little bit at the beginning, it's really about nostalgia and time and place stories. Disney California Adventure Park is not about that. It's about reinvention. It's about energy. It's about diversity. And so where the previous attraction maybe felt at home in a different park, for us, it was the perfect place to inject energy. And the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise itself is irreverent, it's subversive, it's wild, it's fast. And we wanted to do something that sort of aligned with that because that energy aligns with the park.
Well, the attraction would become the down payment on a future land, correct?
It sure would, yeah. Obviously, the popularity of all these heroes and characters, we really wanted to leverage, and this was the first step in that. It was about, as I mentioned earlier, I think how we did bring it to the park, as quickly as we could, trying to do it in a way that was a little bit different than maybe Imagineering had done things in the past. Just trying to do it fast, and yet the goal was always there. That said we had to make sure this was as good, if not better, than what's there. And how do you take an attraction that's already one of the highest rated attractions in the park and make it even better? So I think that was the tough challenge right from the start.
Well, and just going through that ride, Claire, it's just so well done, and all so much to look at. And I thought the art direction and the design inside was so amazing. But I mean, the fact that you guys did finish faster, cheaper, smarter. I remember Joe Rohde just saying it was like almost an impossible achievement, right? But to get it done before Guardians 2 film came out, is that correct? That was a lot of pressure on you all.
Absolutely. I think that was the driving factor for the schedule. But for us, to do something that, at the beginning was not overly well received to our guests, we needed to do it quickly and we needed to do it well. So for us, speed was kind of on our side to get this going. And we really wanted massive transformation as quickly as possible. So that was really critical to us. And the way that we actually did that is we looked at our processes that we have at Imagineering, and we looked at what can we even do differently. Let's disregard all of the ways we've done things in the past and almost sort of go back to the roots of WED Enterprises. What are the core things that we do? We tell stories and we communicate them visually. So we stripped away other design processes that work for other projects that have the luxury of a bit more time and a bit more sleep. And we looked at what do we provide? What are the things we need? We need a colored model, we need colored drawings, and that's kind of it. And for us, it was all about visual storytelling, and we really wanted to use that to convey the big, broad brushstrokes, and then all of the medium and small brushstrokes fell into place along the way. So it was a lot of work by a lot of incredibly talented and dedicated people. But really, to me, it's a great example of Imagineering at its finest. We had identified this fantastic attraction that we knew would be the gateway to a future land. And then we thought, what can we do with the things that we have? So it was massive ingenuity, massive creativity, and I think we were all very happy and pleasantly surprised with the outcome.
And I would imagine that you took some of those lessons learned into your next projects, just how fast and quality-wise you can get things done, right?
Absolutely. And I think if we keep our story at the core and our visual storytelling at the core, because that is what is unique about us at Imagineering, is we do that so well and so differently. So as long as we keep sort of focused on the big thing, then the other things seem to shake themselves out in the wash.
Right. Well, thank you both, John and Claire from Germany.
It's time for bed.
Yes. Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout set the stage for the newest land at Disney California Adventure. It's a land we're all anxiously awaiting to go back to as soon as the park opens. Let's take a sneak peek at this expansion with some of the Imagineers who are currently working on it. Site Portfolio Executive Jeanette Lomboy. Welcome back, Jeanette. Portfolio Creative Executive Scott Drake. Executive Creative Director Brent Strong. Hello, Brent. Executive Story Editor Steven Spiegel. And welcome back again, John Morrow. Thank you all for joining us today. We'd love to hear about what is happening on Adventures Campus. Take it away.
Oh, geez. Well, it's a pretty big story because it is a major expansion, bringing superheroes to life and putting guests right in the middle of all of this action. So it's something that I know we're very excited about and been working on for a very long time. How long has it been, Steve?
I feel like 4 or 5 years, right? And it's funny, because thinking about this panel and thinking about how we got to Avengers Campus is very interesting because the nice thing about the Avengers is, I know you're not expecting to hear this, they're like the Muppets because they live in our world. So in some ways, we can put them anywhere on Earth, and it makes sense for an Avengers land because they can fly and they live in our world. And not only that, Tony Stark has a house in Malibu, and the Pyms live in San Francisco, and Stark Industries is in the South Bay. So there is a lot of roots in California for the Avengers throughout their history already.
And because these stories take place in our world, defining the place was one of our biggest challenges. All of our stories in our park start from a place, and usually it's taking you to a time and place. But for these stories, Iron Man walks into this room right now. I'm in a story with all of them, right? And I think that's what superheroes give us, as Imagineers, this opportunity to kind of redefine and elevate our craft, right? And put guests right in the middle of these epic stories. And what's cool about all of these stories is they're interconnected and they're linked through these extraordinary events. And that's similar to our attractions, right? These are the events that link this whole place together.
It's a really good point because, Disney California Adventure is a counter to Disneyland. Disneyland's about the imaginary, the faraway fantasy. That's not what Disney California Adventure is about. It's about innovation. It's about adventure. It's about discovery, which is why telling the story of the Avengers, telling the story of Spider-Man, and making sure that our guests are part of that story is so important and perfect for the story we're trying to tell here.
And Brent had an awesome way to link this to California. That's your setup, by the way.
Oh, there you go. Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that was so wonderful about getting to create Avengers Campus and really think about how it ties into Disney California Adventure was recognizing that so many of the parts of this park are sort of a nostalgic look back. But when we think about the Avengers, when we think about that spirit of innovation that you were just talking about, Jeanette, we realized that Avengers Campus was really our opportunity to sort of create a Tomorrowland for Disney California Adventure and really look forward and sort of tap into that spirit of Silicon Valley through inventors like Stark and Pym to really dream about what the future could be.
I think the other thing it really did is, starting what I was talking about earlier for Guardians, was it created really a whole new area and invited in new audience, new guests that may not have been familiar or thought about going to Disney California Adventure before. So from that perspective, I think it's really exciting, and knowing that hopefully, like Tomorrowland, it'll never be complete. It's always going to be changing and evolving with new characters and new heroes and new stories to tell. Thanks to all the great content coming out of the studios.
Disney California Adventure has been celebrating diversity, right? And vibrant. And that is absolutely all of our superhero stories, right? We celebrate diversity, vibrancy, modern issues and challenges, right? And the real human feeling and connection that are so part of the storylines that we see in Avengers Campus. So I think it's a perfect place to host these stories, which is Disney California Adventure for that reason. It's real stories right now that are relevant to California and to the fabric of who we are here.
And the fact that the Avengers built this place, it's not a top secret facility that we sneak into. It is opening it up because they know that the world needs more heroes, and we are being invited in to take part in that.
Just as Brent said, with the Tomorrowland fabric of this park, that optimism of what's to come, and that's, when we see superhero films, we kind of want to see ourselves, and we see ourselves in that kind of this diverse cast of heroes.
Hats and shirts that were all part of the Avengers team, right?
But it is all of these heroes that we see ourselves in. We see, and they inspire us, and we hope that if we had those powers, we would make the same decisions, and it kind of brings out the best of us. And I think that's what's great about the storyline of the Avengers is it's about bringing people together, and that's what our parks do so well. So we can take advantage of that optimism.
Mm-hmm.
The day that the Quinjet landed, it went from a construction site to the Avengers are here. It's going to be okay. And it was one of those things that just transformed to a place where you just wanted to, welcome everyone in and celebrate the heroes.
And also, I think it's, a great message for young kids and families coming out of this. And you have some really unique new attractions within it. Can you speak to the web slingers and the new technologies, new attractions that you're doing?
Well, I can speak that Jeanette, Brent, and I all have young kids, and it was almost a mandate from within the team to have an attraction with no height restriction. And that's what we're really proud of with web slingers, is that this can be for all ages, and the ability that, my 7-year-old slinging webs, and all of us have done that pose forever. Now we're able to live that out and be able to sling webs with Spider-Man. That's going to be a pretty amazing thing to give to everybody.
And it's great that I think Spider-Man, of all the Avengers characters, he's beloved by all ages, and by very young children. So it's important. It was very important for us to do something that was not height restricted at all, that welcomed anybody that wanted to sling webs like Spider-Man, and who doesn't, to do it.
I think it's just going to be hard for people to leave and not be able to do it in the real world. I mean, a lot of people are going like that.
I knew we were on the right track when we were first cooking up the idea for web slingers. I remember I was working on a presentation on my laptop at home, and at the time my son was 3, and he sat down next to me on the couch, and to my knowledge he had never seen a Spider-Man TV show or movie or comic book yet, but he looked at the piece of art and he was like, "Oh, Spider-Man, pew, 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 and just immediately started doing the actions. Like, all right, we got it. This is the idea. We just have to make good on that.
Yep, that's going to be the new action by a lot of kids running around the world. Thanks to you all.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely that is the magic in this. There's some wish fulfillment of, the first time we tried it and it was like, oh my gosh, that worked. And it felt exactly like you would expect. So we can't wait to get people in to share this with everyone.
Well, so what's it been like for you all working during the pandemic, working on Zoom, but you got a physical land being built? Take us behind the scenes a little bit over the past year.
It's definitely been a challenge, as you can all imagine, to be under construction and still be under sort of the safety rules of wearing masks and making sure we're socially distant and being very conscientious about safety on site has certainly made it challenging. And then to have just reviews, we're so used to, as Imagineers, looking at things, touching them, holding them, seeing them in person as a way to sort of validate them. And we have to do everything via Zoom. And then it doesn't necessarily always turn out quite like you think when it arrives on the construction site.
During this time, having the ability to go down to a real place, we're in Zoom all day, every day, and having that one day a week where we can go down and see something real was like, it filled you with enough energy for the rest of the week. So that was one. And then the other one, just being, we usually are in a race to the finish to get to the end of a project. And there was definitely more time than we've ever had. And not that we were trying to just use every time, but we were able to just think through all these extra Easter eggs and details that we know the fans will get. And we were able to put things into this attraction that I think maybe someone gets within the first weekend on YouTube, but I think they'll be unfolding for the next couple of years. So it'll be fun to share.
We're going to have lots of fans connecting a lot of dots for a very long time. There's plenty of Easter eggs hidden nice and deep in there. And absolutely the sort of the speed that things unfolded allowed us to hide even more, which is great.
Mm-hmm. And the way it's built too is we can add more Easter eggs as time goes on.
I did want to add, just to go back in time, we were actually scheduled to open Avengers Campus last summer, right around Disneyland's 65th anniversary. And so I will say that Disneyland and our leadership have never wavered from their commitment around this project. And so I will say kind of what has given us hope, right, this entire time, all the cast members, our construction crews, our Imagineers, our operators, is knowing that we were so close to the finish line on this project, right? And it has really taken a village, despite all the challenges during COVID, to get to this point. And as I'm saying, as we look to the rest of 2021, when we know we're going to reopen our doors and open this, I think it'll make it that much sweeter, because this was going to be our tentpole for last summer, and we're happy to make that be the case for this year. So really, I'll tell you, everyone rallied around this one, and it's been extraordinary. And I don't think we're ever going to have this kind of project again. I really, really hope not. But I think it's a testament to the team that has pulled this together to pull all the way through in these really strange and kind of uncontrollable circumstances.
Well, we'd love to give you guys all a sneak peek, and I'd love to hand it over to Brittany, who's there on site, ready to show you all the fun in store.
Hi, Scott. Thank you. I'm Brittany Howell, a technical project coordinator, and we are here in Web Slingers, a Spider-Man adventure, testing the attraction and getting it ready just for you. As we're testing the attraction, we're taking a look at the lighting, we're listening to the audio, and we're confirming that the game gives proper scoring and accuracy so that it is just right when you all come to play. Web Slingers, a Spider-Man adventure, is an opportunity for you, your family, and your friends to become heroes. Thanks to the inventors of Web, which is the Worldwide Engineering Brigade, you have the ability to sling webs just like Spider-Man. I've probably ridden the attraction at least 100 or more times. My highest score is about 480,000, but it's all about teamwork. With my colleague, we were able to score 1,600,000. So I look forward to you guys coming down to beat our high score. I am so excited to open this attraction to our guests. The team has worked so hard to make this happen, even under some very challenging circumstances. We just want you guys to come down and enjoy the attraction with your family and friends.
thank you, Brittany. That was awesome to see. I can't wait to go there in person. And thank you, everybody here on this panel, for joining us today and for just doing such great work. I know all the fans are so appreciative and so excited. So go forward. Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Well, I know we could all go on for hours, and I'm sure all of you would love that, as would I. But we've come to the end of our time today, actually overtime. So I'd like to thank all of our brilliant Imagineers who have joined us on this panel, and the thousands who have contributed their talents, skills, and expertise to Disney California Adventure over the past 20 years. I'd also like to thank our D23 Gold members for joining us today, and be on the lookout for more presentations such as this. They're coming. We have a few more anniversaries we'd like to commemorate this year, and we'd like you to be there with us. I'm Leslie Iwerks. It was great to spend time with you all, and see you next time. Thanks.